What do they do with all the trophies?
I have that same question.
They're not all stored in their homes.
There's that question, but also, like, where are they getting these trophies? Do they have to return them, like, week on week? Are they recycling them shits? Are they propping up the trophy business in New York? I had all kinds of logistic questions.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode 36, and I'm your host, Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined by my voguing sisters, Ebony Astor. Wow, dead air, Ebony.
I was so dumbfounded.
Okay, and Carolyn Pettit.
Hello.
Who can actually speak this morning, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we're the feminist killjoys coming for your media, depending on your perspective. In today's show, we're going to dive into FX's new show, Pose, about trans women living in the 1980s New York City. As always, we'll finish the show by sharing a little something in What's Your FREQ-Out? Exclusively for our fantastic backers, we've got a bonus segment which you can get access to along with other fun perks by joining our podcast community at d.rip/femfreq. Now on with the show. Hello.
Hey, Anita.
I am a little tired this morning.
Are you?
Yeah.
Did you have a busy, hectic weekend?
Were you out at the balls
I had a nice
competing?
weekend, but that has nothing to do with being tired. What happened?
I said, were you out at the balls very late competing?
I went to a lake. I actually went swimming.
Oh, swimming in a lake?
Yeah.
Like out in
Which is
nature?
so
Not
weird, right?
interested.
I had a nice time.
Good.
It was fine.
That sounds good.
I ate oysters. It was great.
From the same
Living
lake?
my best life. Yes, I dove into the lake with like 2,000 children and pulled out the oysters on the bottom.
That sounds fresh.
But there was a kid who was like missing, quote unquote, and so the lifeguards like went at it, and it was really interesting to watch them be super well trained, and like it was also terrifying because they did this thing where like in the shallow end of the lake they would like lock arms and just walk, and like they're hoping to like kick the child.
Right.
That had just drowned, and the whole time I'm freaking out because that would be horrifying. Anyways, the kid was in the bathroom.
Oh my God. Wow.
But it was
that
like, I was
story
like, wow,
took
these,
me on
like,
some highs and lows, Anita.
These lifeguards are very well trained. It was impressive.
Wow.
So, you know, you can go to that lake and know that your child will probably be fine.
Well, I'm disappointed that
Anyways,
you weren't out at the balls all weekend practicing the voguing that I know you do. In the comfort
They would
of your
reject
own
me in
home.
a heartbeat.
Girl, listen, none of us can compete at that level.
I know.
I mean,
I know.
Let me just say right now that I had high hopes for the House of Adams, but we took no trophies. We do not know how to walk.
No. I think we could all learn a little something. Anyways, before we get into Pose, which would have been a lovely transition, but I've ruined it, we are going to check in with what's happening in entertainment this week.
Yeah, got a few big stories for you. First of all, so James Gunn, the director, best known currently for the Guardians of the Galaxy films.
Also worked on Lollipop Chainsaw, the super sexist video game, in case anyone was wondering.
Mm-hmm.
So he has been fired from the Guardians films. What led to his firing was a campaign by a bunch of alt-right folks on Twitter, led by kind of alt-right figurehead Mike Cernovich, who dredged up old tweets of his making jokes about things like rape and pedophilia, and and then kind of crusading, petitioning Disney, having people try to like cause a scene at Comic-Con, and all these things to put pressure on Disney to fire him, which they did. And they, the thing about this that a lot of people are talking about is that it's so apparent that Cernovich and company are not like acting out of a place of concern. Oh, the Disney has somebody directing their films who has such low morals. I mean, Mike Cernovich's tweets are disgusting.
I mean, he was a figurehead in Gamergate as well.
Yeah, I mean, he is openly just the most vile, misogynist, transphobic, person, one of the most misogynistic, transphobic people you could think of. It's purely like a retribution for Gunn, sometimes being critical of Trump on Twitter. And so, like, certainly I don't really care about James Gunn's career. I don't feel like a straight white man who's already made, bajillions of dollars directing a massive franchise needs my, like, sympathy or support. But the problem with this whole situation is the precedent it sets that these, not trolls, but these right-wing harassers can act in bad faith to get their way. It's not dissimilar in that sense from, what happened after Jessica Price was fired from ArenaNet, and it kind of emboldened these people to go after other women in games because they had some success and they felt like they had the power to do that. And so apparently there's been now some momentum against, other folks like, Patton Oswalt and other sort of comedians and figures on Twitter who are critical of Trump.
It's so ridiculous too, particularly because we're coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, which is just this huge weekend for geekery, but is also like kind of geek capitalism at its widest and most pervasive, right? And so the idea that James Gunn was fired, but that someone like Johnny Depp gets trotted out in the character of Grindelwald,
that dude is like fucking Teflon, man. Johnny Depp just can't. Nothing can stick to him, even though like he beat his wife.
Yeah.
And come
on, like how is that
dude
still getting work? Like right. How is he still getting work for real?
Yeah, and it's Disney. I mean, Disney firing James Gunn over some tweets that were, in poor taste. They were vile, but they are continuing to employ this man who abused his wife. Like, what the F? Also, Amber Heard was in the same hall, like at Comic-Con, and like right after the event, the Fantastic Beasts event came out on stage for the what franchise is she
Aquaman?
In? For I guess Aquaman. Yeah.
Are we just totally making this?
No,
up?
she was in whatchamacallit, the movie we all loved, the recent DC movie,
Justice
League.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Yeah, so she's going to be in the new Aquaman movie.
Yeah.
I think the thing with James Gunn is you already said this. It's so complicated because like it's weaponizing our like social justice values against folks who support Trump, who are opposed to Trump, right? And so like like I don't give a shit about James Gunn either. And he like good. He shouldn't be saying the like whatever. Yeah, it's just so it's this like difficult conundrum to be in where you're like fuck you for using these like ill intentions to go after people when you really don't actually care about any of this.
Exactly. Yeah,
and it puts us in an awkward position.
Like there's this whole it's and that's just across the political landscape now of you on the left have these standards, these rules. So we're going to apply them to you because you apply them to yourselves, but we're not going to, like, Trump, like, everyone knows he's an abuser, but nobody on the right cares, but, they sure went hard over the idea that, like, Al Franken should have stepped down, I'm glad he did, but, like, like the same people who don't give a fuck at all about any of Trump's transgressions made a huge issue out of Al Franken because
it's intense hypocrisy.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's all fun. So in other much better news, Anita, I know you're super.
You can't compare these two things.
No, they're not. No, I'm just saying, like. You are a huge fan of Buffy. Great news. They are rebooting Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Joss is involved. It's
so when you shared this news in the office on Friday, how did I react?
So I knew you were going to have I said, I know you're going to have feelings about this, like intense feelings. I don't know if they're going to be good or bad, but I know they're going to be feelings, you know, are you sitting down? Are you ready? And then I posted it. And I think I immediately heard like an extremely long, intense no from the other
I
from
think
the
I
other
may
room.
have started crying a little bit too.
Yeah.
If there's anything to be slightly hopeful about, it's the fact that Monica Owusu-Breen is going to be showrunner for this reboot.
I know.
No, you know, no.
I
I mean,
know.
and I say this as someone who doesn't give 1/10 of a scintilla of an iota of a hint of a glimmer of a shit about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, but you watched some episodes for me.
I know, because I'm a good person, and because we were desperate for a bonus, and also because I wanted to, you know, hear your reaction. But hearing that, like, okay, Monica Owusu-Breen, who is amazing, and you know,
What would people know her from?
I know her from the fact that I just got to go to this amazing female showrunners panel at the YouTube space, but she's done tons of stuff. The thing I know her for is Fringe, which I'm currently watching 5 years late. So, you know, obviously don't come to me for up-to-date entertainment news. But no, she's a woman of color. She's a Black woman. You know, she's incredibly smart, incredibly sharp. And so I think if this has to be done, which no, it doesn't have to, but if it has to be done, the fact that she's at the helm and that the main character is going to be another Black woman, I think, okay, I might give it a courtesy watch, which I'm sure Fox is super waiting to hear that from me. You know,
Can you explain, Anita? Can you explain, because I think some people who know that you're a fan of the show, you know, may not immediately understand, like, why wouldn't this be good news to you?
Yeah, so I think that the thing about Buffy is that it came at a very, very specific point in, like, media history, in television history, and especially in feminist television history. And, like, Buffy was so unique and rare in that like, when Buffy ended, the common consensus is that no show would ever get made like this again, because it was just so radical for the time. And it had it had 7 seasons. It was about a young woman, and it had very complex, flawed narratives in it, which, again, TV was not all that back then, right? It's not what we have now. And so part of the frustration for me is that, like, it's this very special gem of a show that a lot of us attached to, because it provided these stories and these narratives and these characters that you just didn't get anywhere else at the time. And we've held on to that for all of these years. We have so many more shows now that do that have complex, flawed characters, that have, like, you know, really complicated storylines about characters going up and down and learning and growing. And so I don't see why we need to remake Buffy, because I think that it's just going to do a disservice to the original material. But I'm not opposed to a show that takes place in the Buffy verse, right? So, like, if it's like 20 years into the future after the end of the 7th season, because I'm not going to acknowledge the 8th season, because what the fuck was that? You know what I'm talking about out there.
fellow nerds.
Yeah, I was like, Carolyn and everybody have no idea what I'm talking
I really
about.
don't.
Comic book thing?
Yeah.
The comic book thing, yeah.
But, or, like, you know, there's a spin-off comic called Frey that a lot of people really liked, if it was based on something like that. So, you know, like, it's not clear what it is yet. It has just been announced. It's very, you know, like, there is talk about the protagonist being a Black woman. Is the protagonist going to be Buffy? Is she going to be, like, is it literally a remake? Does it start in high school again? Like, I don't know. And so I, like, lost my shit, and I was very upset about it, but I'm, you know, this is not the end of the world.
If the protagonist is a Black woman,
it's not the end of the world,
and her name is Buffy, I'm gonna lose my shit.
Oh,
Like, just on that level alone, I will refuse to watch.
I don't know, man. So whatever, we'll see what happens. Like, yeah, it sounds like there's some good people involved in it, but I'm not happy about this. The funny thing is that the internet has gotten real mad at me, like real mad at, like, my hypocrisy, being like, you know how it feels now. Like, and I was like, what? I was very like, it was mind-boggling to me what they were talking about. First, I think that they were talking about, so like earlier this week I was like, oh my God, the new She-Ra looks so cool, right?
Because those dudes who were like, now you know what it feels like, they're the target audience, the true.
Yeah, they grew up watching She-Ra, I'm sure, and that they've cared about that show at all. Or like they're getting mad about like Ghostbusters and like the remakes with all women, and I was like, this is different. Like, it's a completely different type of franchise with a completely different fandom, and like it's not like they're recreating it and like remaking Ghostbusters with an all-female cast is like a fun, interesting new take on it. Remaking Buffy, that's already a film with like a movie with like decent like morals and like trying to do progressive things at a time when that wasn't really happening. Like, why are you remaking it? What are you changing about it? What is going to be good about it? Right? Like,
yeah,
they're not the same.
They're not. But, and it's very obvious to folks like you and I why it's not the same at all. But to the people who want an excuse to to them, it's exactly the same.
They don't give a fucking shit about She-Ra.
No.
Like, they never watched it. They only watched it when She-Ra was on He-Man.
Exactly.
Like, and they've never put another thought into that show, right?
I really honestly think there was one tweet that I posted on our Slack that I really think nailed it. Like, why certain men are reacting so vocally to the She-Ra redesign. It's that, they object to girls having images and like role models and and stuff that doesn't kind of instill in them a focus on being desirable to men, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't word that very well, but this tweet.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's the news.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Pose.
Please,
do it.
Let's talk about Pose.
Pose is FX's hot new show about trans women living and surviving and thriving in 1980s during the AIDS crisis and Ronald Reagan's America. I'd like to just read a quote that I think positions what the show is doing briefly before we dive into it. So this is from an article in Variety, and it was taken from, well, it says in this. So the women of Pose are pretty full embodied in terms of their gender identities, said Janet Mock, a trans activist and writer who is a writer-producer on Pose, during a panel at the Television Critics Association Winter Press Tour on Friday. This was last year. The characters are beyond the struggle with their bodies, with people calling them by their right names. These are people who are creating new ways of having family, chosen family, through the ballroom networks. And I just wanted to position that because I think that I didn't quite realize that when I was watching it, but then I read this quote and I was like, yeah, that's fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a trans woman myself, this show is utterly extraordinary. It's got so many trans women in the core cast as primary characters. I've never had a show that I could look to that had this, and where the narratives about the trans characters, were rooted in them, living their lives as trans women, as opposed to like stuff around them kind of transitioning or like purely being trans. I mean, obviously their transness is a massive part of their lives and their struggles in the show, but it doesn't encompass, the entirety of who they are. They are characters who get to grow, and be human to us beyond the scope of simply just being trans.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic where, like, one of the things about representing marginalized folks is that often you have to be like oppressed in your representation. You don't just get to be. And I think that this show does an interesting job of like showing like the struggles with being trans, especially during this time period, and like the jobs you have to take, the exclusion from your family, like the poverty, all like the gritty darkness of it. But they do such a good job of developing these fully realized characters with hopes and dreams and intellect and like the way that they find community in such darkness.
Yeah. So a big part of the show is the ballroom culture, which if anyone's ever seen the documentary Paris is Burning, which is kind of problematic in some ways, it's directed by a cis white woman, but it is also a document of the balls and ballroom culture. But for anyone who doesn't know, these were sort of dance and fashion, competitions / celebrations of queer and trans life and beauty that took place in New York around that time period. And to me, there's this interesting kind of tension in the show, because so often at the balls, so there's different categories, right? The MC, Pray Tell, played by Billy Porter, who's just
the
phenomenal.
Luminous, magnificent, regal Billy Porter.
He'll like announce the category. I'm trying to think of an example, like
executive realness.
Realness.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing.
Oh,
So
that's what you're getting at.
So,
And
like,
princess.
yeah, like realness is almost always like the term realness is used so much as the measure of their success. But what does realness mean? It often means coming. So the ballrooms are created as a way for these people who are shunned by mainstream culture to celebrate their beauty, to have community, etc. And yet within that space, like real, quote unquote, realness, which kind of means like looking cis, / quote unquote passing, achieving a standard of beauty that mimics often what the cis hetero culture says is beautiful / real, is kind of the goal, but at the same time, in the show, kind of at odds with that, in my mind, you have this character named Angel, who is one of the trans women, and she has a cis, boyfriend named Stan. And Stan's a hot, white executive. He works at fucking Trump Tower or some shit. And at one point, he's never been with a trans woman before. And at one point, he says to her, you're like the only person I know that's real because you are yourself. So it kind of flips everything around. Like in a world that says that Stan as a cis white dude, is real. And all of these, trans people are phonies. They're pretenders. They're pretending to be something they're not. Stan sees it the other way around. Like he sees Angel as real, as living with integrity, as being herself, and sees kind of himself and a lot of the rest of society, I would imagine by extension, as kind of false. And that conversation, really hit me hard.
Yeah, so I watched 3 episodes and some change. I haven't been able to watch all 8 episodes yet. So y'all can walk me back if it seems like I'm going out on a limb here with an argument that isn't supported textually by this. But, I loved everything I saw about the episodes. I loved the color. I loved the love. I loved the melodrama. I loved how this, the story could go from, exaggerated, kind of campy, hyperbolic, kind of operatic gestures to the tiniest, realest of, twitches of like a cheekbone to show you emotion, the way the show veers from kind of, bold print to the very subtle. I loved all of it. But one thing that I hope that we get in season 2 is an examination and an interrogation of the profound racial dynamics within the ballroom scene, because this is a scene that is by and for Black and brown people, right? And poor people. You cannot divorce class from this show and from these people's lives. The reality of the work they have to do just to survive and get by. These are not middle class people. These are not rich people. And so the fact that part of the pageantry of the ballroom scene is about this very aspirational and very white kind of appearance, I want to get into that. In the very first episode, what's her name? Candy Ferocity is behind, I can't even remember who she's talking to, but she says, "You need to show me how to get this hair like Madonna. Whenever I try, I wind up looking more like Miss Seeley." There is something so deep going on to have this beautiful, dark-skinned Black woman hating on the natural texture of her hair and wanting to instead emulate this, iconic white female performer of the 80s. And, later, I think it's maybe in episode 7, when they talk about, this is in an actual ball event, 2 of the audience members are saying, it's about passing in the straight white world. Like, whiteness is just as important, even though it's a costume, it's something that is donned, but there's a way in which, like the characters, at the same time that they're trying to emulate something they don't have, we're not getting some of the interrogation we need of why exactly this represents this for them and how they're being transgressive about the way they try and own it.
I really appreciate there's a whole storyline about there's this character of Electra Abundance, this kind of arch, strict, stern, but very sort of successful house mother, right? She and her family always kind of dominate the balls. They take home tons of trophies every week. But she is a kept woman, right? She has an executive who keeps her in a beautiful, Manhattan loft, but she wants to have SRS. And
do you want to say what that is for folks who aren't familiar?
Sex reassignment surgery, and the man who possesses her, who sees her as one of his possessions, played by Chris Maloney of all people. Maloney, sorry, yeah. He forbids her from doing this because if she does it, she will not be the possession that he prizes anymore. Just like that. There's a whole arc that happens, but I think Electra's sort of internal struggle and internal experience of realizing how much she is just prized as an object and not loved as a person by these men is it's heartbreaking. I mean, she's often a kind of unsympathetic character because we so often see her being so cold, so cruel to her children. She's very aloof, but as we saw her struggling with man after man who only wants her if she fits the mold of a trans woman who has not had SRS, it's heartbreaking, and it speaks to, I think, the weird tension that so many trans people lived in and in some ways continue to live in, the ways in which they're put into boxes, the ways in which we're fetishized and not seen as human, right? The ways in which we're wanted to be a certain thing but not necessarily loved as people. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, one of the things also that I loved, and I think this goes back to what you started the conversation with, Anita, was in the episodes that I saw, I appreciated that there weren't these long, lingering kind of montages of transition from one state to another that we typically get in stories that feature trans actors and trans people, so the donning of makeup or the putting on of wigs or whatever, to emphasize that we don't truly believe that who they say they are is who they are. Right? This show doesn't give us that. It refuses to give us that. We see these women who are already what they are. They are not in a state of becoming. They are not trying to be something. They are already. And although they are trying to live their best lives and be their best selves, it is not about reducing them to the level of surface, and I so appreciated that. And I was so gratified because you really don't expect it from a show with this as its kind of remit, right? And one of the things that I've loved about reading people's responses on social media is the reaction from the queer community of people who are like, you know what? I was almost scared to watch this show because knowing that it was about Black and brown, queer and trans folks, I expected death and sadness to be at the end. And I didn't want to hold my breath through another show or another movie that tells me at the end there's no chance for happiness, there's no chance for community, I will always be ostracized, that all there is for me is trauma, you know? And so to have people be like, I am so overjoyed because at the end there is love and there is happiness and there is, you know, grabbing life, you know, like it's just, it's incredibly emotional. I cried in every single episode.
So this show is created by the dudes that made Glee. And when I saw them as like the creators, I was like, what in the fuck? Like, why are these dudes making this show? And then, you know, like Janet Mock is involved. And so that makes you feel a little bit better. And then they, you know, they obviously cast a lot of trans folks. I think one of the things that they bring to this as storytellers is that this is just a story about, like any other story, about poverty, about identity, about like struggle. It's like it's a very traditional story structure.
Yes.
And it's just filled with a story that we never hear.
Exactly.
And I think that that's why part of why it's so appealing, because it's like fresh and interesting and new, but also it has that comfort of, we know how these stories are told. We see the familiarity in the story structures. And I think they do a really good job of that.
Yeah, there is a certain, you know, in my sense, in my opinion, a positive kind of normalization of these people and their experiences that happens by telling these stories, as you say, in the structure of a show. In the a structure that is so immediately familiar that any viewer who, you know, watches TV dramas, like, they'll immediately get into the groove of it and feel familiar with the beats, you know, those kinds of things. And yet, you know, to Ebony's point, like, of the angle that the show takes on these stories, I think it's so important that it absolutely acknowledges, it brutally acknowledges, it does not in any way diminish the fact that the AIDS crisis was an absolute genocide that left the community just utterly devastated. I mean, it digs into that grief, like, you know, it absolutely does. And yet at the same time, and in a way that's not at all contradictory, like, these are not, because a few of the characters are positive, HIV positive. This is not a story about people who, you know, for whom HIV, the diagnosis is just an immediate, like, death sentence. These are not people dying of AIDS. I mean, it may come to that for some of them at some point, but they are people living with AIDS, and that is huge as well. Right?
Yeah. Like, when in the very first episode, when we see Blanca in the waiting room, waiting to go into the doctor's office to find out her results, right? Before she gets called in, we see this young male couple, one of whom who has clearly gotten the news that he is HIV positive, break down in the arms of his partner, right? Conversely, we see Blanca go in and get the news, and she's very stoic, you know, and she knows it's a different way of dealing with it, because this is all she knows, like, how to fight and survive. And so throughout the course of the season, this is a woman who, oh my God. Linda Belcher, Blanca Evangelista, Mothers of the Year, don't at me. She came in, gathered all those children to her, and, you know, didn't reveal until the end when she told Angel, you know, hey, I'm HIV positive.
Spoilers.
Listen, yeah, spoilers.
But it's in the first.
Throw the spoilers up. Yeah, you know what? Okay.
That was in the last episode.
Yeah, that was just on last night. That was just on last night, right?
Yeah, she didn't tell Angel that she was HIV positive until the end of the season.
Oh, telling Angel.
Yeah.
Right, but we know from the beginning that Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, okay.
But anyway, yeah, just, you know, like Caro said, the idea that, and Pray Tell finds out his diagnosis as well, right? the fact that people are allowed to break down, but they also know that there's too much life to still be fought for. And that's what we're shown, and it's just so rare and so welcome to see them be allowed to blossom and unfold in that way. Given what we've been given to date in the media, like if we have characters like this, they never get to live and be happy and get the happy ever after. They never get that.
So related to what Carolyn was talking about earlier with the conversation between Angel and Stan, where he's just like, "But you're living and I'm not." Basically, there's a quote in a review from Vulture that I thought was really interesting. It says,
Matt Zoller cites?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
It said, I think so.
Okay,
I don't remember.
It's fine.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I know I'm like that. Human beings from all walks of life are constantly mistaking conditioning and social expectations for destiny, then trying to fight their way out of that emotional quicksand over the course of years or decades, if in fact they recognize the danger at all, which many of them don't. And he's used that to sort of sum up all of the characters and what the show is doing, and I really liked that because it's not like there are specific struggles to being trans, but they are showing other characters in this, like cis characters in this universe, who are struggling with social expectations of how to fit in. What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be a family man? What does it mean to be a housewife?
Yes, 100%. Like Ebony's favorite.
And like that, those are similar struggles.
Exactly.
Did I just say, yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, so Ebony's favorite actor, Kate Mara, plays Stan's wife, Patricia, and there's absolutely in the show concern for how she has probably never been a real person, has never been fully herself, because she probably from a very young age was instilled with these expectations of growing up to be this kind of housewife, and in a sense that's all she is. And when cracks start to show in the marriage, it makes her start to reflect on what she's done with her life, who she really is. I mean, there's a moment in when Stan and Patricia are in a therapist's office, and Stan just starts sobbing when Patricia asks him, certain questions. And I was watching that and thinking, this is probably the most honest moment, in all the years of like dating and marriage and raising their children and everything. This moment right now in this therapist's office where Stan is crying is probably the most honest moment these two people have ever had between them in their lives, because they've lived performances with each other, right? Stan trying to be the successful husband, provider, father. Patricia trying to be the housewife. It absolutely, the show absolutely makes us question and think about elements of performance and constructed identity in all of our lives.
Yeah, I have to say, and y'all, listen, trust me, I'm being honest here. My displeasure with, what was her name? Patty? Stan's wife.
Yeah, Patty. Yeah, Patty.
Patty Bowes on the show had nothing to do with her being played by Kate Mara, even though I do stake my position on the fact that there are too many Maras working in Hollywood right now. But I will admit that part of my reaction to her character was my frustration at the absolute legitimacy of, the way that the show showed the privilege of her position versus someone like Angel, right? So this is not Patty's fault, but when she goes in to her doctor, for instance, and says, I want to get tested for STDs and for AIDS specifically, right? Her doctor speaks to her in such a human way and says, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do this anonymously because I don't want it to fuck up your insurance. I don't want it to get out. You can trust me. You can, I will be very discreet. And just the privilege of this straight, white, middle-class character over someone like Angel or the other members of the House of Evangelista, right? I just thought, I don't want to cede more time to whiteness, in life or in this show. So although I appreciate what the paralleling that was going on when Angel and Patty are having that conversation in the diner, and you realize they're both talking about realizing that being a kept woman is not what they thought it would be, and they find it dissatisfying. While I appreciated that, that creative choice, I would have appreciated it more if we got to learn that side of Patty or have those conversations. Maybe in season 2. In season 1, I just felt like I wanted less time with Stan and his wife. I needed more with the House of Evangelista, less time with Stan and James Vanderbeek. And
I don't agree. I think I was like, what, the whole Trump addition to this, and like James I did not see Dawson at all in that character, which is so hard to do. I was like, this is fucking brilliant casting. And I actually, having Stan positioned in that world and trying to be this sort of like playboy guy was a nice parallel.
I love that in the first scene that we get with James Vanderbeek, he, does like a line of coke and says, "God bless Ronald Reagan," right? Mm-hmm. Because, the war on drugs not going to affect him one bit, right? Like, in fact, the war on drugs is like helping shore up like white upper class cocaine use. But Poppy, meanwhile, and like other characters, like drugs for them are, if they get caught with drugs, I mean, there are going to be huge consequences for them, right? They may be tossed in jail for years. So I even though it's a very slight kind of just quick moment which the show takes to establish that, like, I so value the show acknowledging all of those kinds of discrepancies and so for me, I always appreciated the way that when it was in Stan's world, it was there were absolutely like thematic ties that resonated with the experiences of the members of like House Evangelista and everything.
I have a really important question.
Okay.
What the fuck do they do with all the trophies?
I have that same question.
They're not all stored in their homes.
There's that question, but also, like, where are they getting these trophies? Do they have to return them, like, week on week? Are they recycling them shits? Are they propping up the trophy business in New York? I had all kinds of logistic questions.
No, who can afford to buy that many trophies all the time? So, like, do they give the trophies back every week so that they can give them out again?
I'm saying, because if there's a ball every week and you're getting 10, 15 trophies, come on.
And there ain't no trophies in their houses where they're living, so what are they doing?
Okay.
You don't think this is important? I think this is really important.
I have the same question.
Yeah.
I also want to know when we can get our heist movie from the House of Abundance. In the first episode, when they break into that art museum and steal all the stuff for the royalty walk, I was like, this is the versions of Ocean's 8 I didn't know I needed. I loved it. Loved it. Please give them a heist movie.
That sounds awesome.
Show does.
When do we get that? Carolyn?
Huh?
Did you just hate Ocean's 8 so much that you
No, I'm down. I mean,
I feel like the first episode was a little bit Ocean's 8 when they go in and they try to...
Yeah, but it was only a couple of
minutes.
minutes. I could use 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes the show veers so much into like camp, like the house ferocity toward the end of the season. They're basically like the rival band from Gem and the Holograms.
I know, who were my favorite, the Misfits.
Yes. Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Like, this show tonally was so all over the place, but it just worked. It just worked. It was such a celebration, and everyone in it. I mean, and let's be real, some of the acting is wow.
Not the best.
Yeah. I mean,
some of it is really good.
Some of it is amazing. Some of it is amazing. Some of it is, it's not painful, but it is one step, to the
There's
left
one
of
character that I find painful. I'm not going to
I know exactly who it is. I'm going to confirm with you after this is over. But I nevertheless loved every line reading she gave because she was giving it everything.
Check out the show. It's on FX. It just finished the first season, which is 8 episodes, and it was renewed for a second season. So catch up quick and tell us what you think about it. FREQ-Out. I almost wrapped up the whole show. We have FREQ-Outs. So, Ebony, Carolyn, what are your FREQ-Outs this week?
Ebony, you go first this time.
I'm happy to go first. You've given me a nice long break in having to go first. So my freak out this week is a speech that Suzanne Brockman gave at the Romance Writers of America conference about a week ago, I want to say. So y'all who know me, which is maybe one out of our 3 listeners, know that I am an avid romance reader. I write in the genre as well, poorly, but anyways, I'm a huge fan, have been for decades, like since I was probably too young to be reading the shit I was reading. And I will go to bat for the genre all day, every day. It is such a diverse and complicated and weird and wild and celebratory and, can be, like woman-centered genre that I just really hold dear to my heart. But nevertheless, like much of publishing, like most of media, has had a real problem in allowing other voices to kind of take their place on the stage. And so a writer by the name of Suzanne Brockman, who is just phenomenally, like wildly successful, and who writes books that, feature, queer male characters, queer female characters, non-white characters, etc. Just someone who's really invested in making sure that her books, and the characters within them represent kind of the beauty of, culture at large. Received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the RWA and took time during this speech to take the publishing industry and, the romance industry and specifically like the white gatekeepers to church. I'm going to link you to her speech, but basically this woman came to kick ass, take names, and chew gum, and she was all out of gum. So she just read those people for filth. It was so good. Basically just saying like, yo, fellow white people, it is on us. We need to stop showing our asses. I'm telling you, I would rather be right than be nice. We need to vote the motherfuckers who are currently in office out of office. The way that we've been conducting business as usual is not the way. I'm staking my claim. I'm using my white woman privilege to say no more. I was here for every single piece. So yeah, I'm going to link that. My freak out is Suzanne Brockman taking folks to church in her RWA Lifetime Achievement Award speech. Hey now.
Nice. Carolyn?
So this is maybe a slightly odd, sad thing to build a freak out around. But a man named Jonathan Gold, who was a famed Los Angeles food critic, just passed away at the age of 57. And I was definitely aware of him, but not really like a reader of his work. I'd heard that he had tremendous influence. I'd heard that he celebrated, the food of the people in Los Angeles, right? That he was as likely to write a rave of a taqueria in a strip mall if it was phenomenal as he would like any other restaurant. And just in the wake of his passing, like I've just been seeing so many kind of tributes and remembrances of him on Twitter that I just find kind of beautiful. One here in a 2015 interview with Vice. Jonathan Gold said, "I'm trying to democratize food and trying to get people to live in the entire city of Los Angeles. I'm trying to get people to be less afraid of their neighbors." And at another quote of his that I like, he says, "If you live in Los Angeles, you're used to having your city explained to you by people who come in for a couple of weeks, stay in a hotel in Beverly Hills, and take in what they can get to within 10 minutes in their rent-a-car. The thing that people find hard to understand is the magnitude of what's here. The huge numbers of multiple cultures that live in the city that come together in this beautiful and haphazard fashion. And the fault lines between them are sometimes where you can find the most beautiful things. There's a documentary about him called City of Gold. He's actually the first food critic to ever win a Pulitzer Prize. I haven't yet, even myself, I have to say, I haven't even watched City of Gold yet, but I've heard a lot of great things about it. I'm looking forward to watching it. I wish it hadn't taken this event to get me to really kind of take an interest in him and his work. But yeah, it seems like he did what we want, food writers to do, and, celebrated, made it about more than just the food itself, but really about the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah. Can I just take Carolyn's freak out? I basically didn't look at Twitter for a day, so I didn't know about that until like super late last night. And yeah. I don't have a freak out this week.
Okay.
Do you want to talk some more about being at the lake?
No, but I can do. Ebony gave me a freak out. What did you want me to do about Avatar?
Yeah, so I was reading this great piece about it being the 10th anniversary of the finale of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And this writer, if I can find the link, I'm an old woman, so I might not remember where I saw it, but if I can find the link, this person just expertly broke down what was so like artistically creative and brilliant about the series as a whole, but about the finale in particular, and how storylines were wrapped up, artistically, narratively, musically even. So I just was like, oh, yo, I know Anita loved that show. Like, you should make that your freak out. And you were like, whatever. People know what I think about Avatar. But maybe people don't,
I don't
Anita.
know if I've ever like talked about it that much. Yeah, I can't believe it's been 10 years. Holy shit, man. We're getting old.
I've been old.
That's true.
You're not even catching up.
I'm trying to catch up. Yeah. Yeah, I really, really liked Avatar: The Last Airbender, the TV show, not the movie. And part of... Man, I kind of want to go back and rewatch it, but there's no time to rewatch things when we're trying to catch up on all the fucking new things that, like, I feel like just... whatever came out last year that I didn't get to see or whatever. Anyway,
girl, new things. I'm watching Fringe. Like,
I know,
my
but you're
dumbass
weird.
is watching fucking Fringe and getting mad as hell on a daily basis about this 8-year-old show.
It's so, I'm really grappling. I don't know, maybe this is a bonus about how I'm really grappling with what it means to be a feminist critic today and the types of media that we have. And I've noticed in the last year, I've really don't know how to make sense of this landscape. But, and I say that because, The Last Airbender,
sounds like a good bonus to me.
All people of color, the whole fucking show, which was unheard of at the time. I mean, still kind of is to today, but we're seeing more, right? More of that. And it was, it was one of those kids shows that's also like really fun and interesting for adults. And it was really progressive in its messaging. So it talked about like immigration. It talked about global warming. It talked about like, big political issues in the landscape of this like really fascinating world where, excuse me. Wow. Where some people have powers and other people don't. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how does that transform cultures? And really beautiful art style. I remember first watching it and being like, this is sort of anime style and they're speaking in English and this is making me really uncomfortable. And then you like lean into it and it makes a lot more sense. But I really liked it, and I was very disappointed in Korra, which was the follow-up, which I thought I would love because it starred a woman, and that was really exciting. And I thought Korra got the politics completely wrong at every fucking turn. Like, every single season got it very, very wrong, even though it did some things that were interesting in terms of having a female starring the show, having sort of like a queer storyline. Politically, I thought it was not good. So I think I sort of forgot about that franchise a little bit because of how much I didn't like Korra, which was disappointing. But 10 years, man. I kind of want to go back and watch some of those.
Let's do it.
Maybe we'll do that next time you're in the office, Ebony.
Yo.
That's our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday. And remember that you too can join our podcast community and help us keep making this show so that you can listen to it every single week. We appreciate anything that you can pitch in. And you can do that at d.rip/femfreq. If you are enjoying the show and you want to give us money, we'd like that. But we also would love it if you would rate and review us on iTunes and tell your friends too. So like, you're at the ball and you're trying desperately to be as cool as these women. And like, you're getting all glitzed and glamored and you're like backstage and you think you're going to like compete in the like, I don't know, the what was one of the category? Like the princess category. And you're like, hey, so, we're doing our makeup and stuff and you look really great, but there's this really great show called Feminist Frequency Radio and you should check it out and we'll listen to it after this. Great, cool.
And then after that, tell them they look like a brick. Hey, yo!
You can check out all of our work and our other podcasts at feministfrequency.com and be sure to follow us on Twitter at FemFreq to stay up to date on all of the news. We're also on Instagram at FemFreq, so you can follow us there too if you want. I am at Anita Sarkeesian.
I'm at Carolyn Michelle.
I am at House of Macaroni. Everyone is welcome.
Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed our theme music, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.